Hello, Nikki. Welcome to the show. I'm very, very happy to have you here. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Hey, I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name's Nikki Clifton and I'm a visual effects producer.
What's a VFX producer?
So a video effects producer, there's slightly different roles with some video effects producers. So some of them will be very involved in actually seeking out projects and seeking out work and are more in a sort of sales role.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other producers that are more along the lines of line producers, in that they will get, from my own experience,
Mm-hmm.
I had clients and they would come to me with budgets and scripts. And then I would talk to the artists and we would work out what was actually needed to do the job and do the job within the budget. So we would work out the feasibility of it or how we could approach it, possible different ways of approaching it to make it manageable for that amount of money. Or you would go away and you would think about the possible discounts that you could give to make to land the job within that money and for the company not to lose money. So once you've actually won the job, you then manage the job and look after the client and manage their expectations and make sure that they have what they want when they want, within feasibility. They create schedules for the client, so the client understands what's needed, what approval processes are required and when. And you are also a sort of quality control person. So if somebody gives you work and you don't really think it's what the client is expecting creatively, you can push back and say, no, can you have another go at that, please? And also you make sure that everything that's kind of going out is what's expected and that it's going at a pace for, the job not to kind of stack up at the end and everybody to run out of time to achieve what's needed.
I hope you don't mind me asking this question. What do you need from the client to make your work easy? For instance, I'm sure it's similar between movie and commercial, but for instance, in movies, it will be easier if we have like a script breakdown, for instance, to make the work easier.
Well, I think a clear creative brief is something. A clear creative brief, an understanding of timings of what's expected and when. So you can actually say, if it's not possible, it's sort of, there's no point in somebody coming to you with, the idea of a hugely long animated movie and expecting it to be done in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's elements like that, and there's also things. There's also kind of clear communication and prompt approvals, prompt responses. Yeah.
I think like everywhere is don't get afraid of mistakes as well, because this is how we all learn anyways, and I think it's the same at that level as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Put your hand up.
Yeah.
If you think it's going slightly amiss, let everybody know. And actually, that's very much the producer's role. Currently we're all working in lockdown. Sometimes we have to say, hey, sorry, there's a power cut in Southeast London, My artist can't get you that far.
But I don't have enough battery in my phone
Yeah.
to finish the conversation. How did you end up working as a VFX producer?
It's a bit of a long story, but I initially started out in advertising as an account manager, and then jumped around in lots of different roles. I worked in a sound studio at one point, ended up in a post house as a scheduler, and then moved back to agencies as an agency producer. And then I worked for a production design company as a producer. And then I took a very long time out to raise some children. my children.
Great.
And then I went back into post houses, and I just went into scheduling because I'd been out for so long. I'd lost a lot of confidence, and then I became CG resources manager at the mill, and then I decided that I wanted to move back into production, really. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Amazing. Was production your first choice?
No. From the from the age of 5, I wanted to be a hairdresser, but lockdown has taught me that I wouldn't have made money at it.
Who was your victim?
My victim was my family. They have forgiven me, but
that's great.
but they definitely haven't forgotten. And I think it's something they're going to be telling their grandchildren about.
That's a good story then.
So I'm really glad I didn't become a hairdresser. Then much later on, I wanted to be a florist, which my father was mortified, absolutely mortified. And I decided I didn't want to do that because I realised you had to go to market at 4 or 5 in the morning, and I knew I couldn't get out of bed that early. But then once I sort of fell into advertising, actually it was always production from that moment.
Okay. Which movies have you made you want to pursue a career in the industry?
For me, it's not so much a movie, it's a place. And I was really fortunate that as a child, the street I grew up in, there was a cinema at the end of the road. So it was 30 or 40 yards from my house. So every week I was in the cinema. It was almost like go to school 5 days a week, go to the cinema. That was my life every week until I was about 18. So there was just so many films, it was just such a huge part of my life that it was probably inevitable.
Yeah, it was like almost like bread and butter, or
even as a really small child, I remember playing at the end of the road and sort of playing on the steps of the cinema, and there was always this sort of mystery around it. It's actually a very old 1930s cinema, and there's a sort of a huge history movement around this cinema, but everybody had a story in the village about the cinema, whether it was the boys who used to climb in through the toilet windows to watch the film for free, or the usher with all the warts that we all thought was a witch. It was just a huge part of growing up.
Yeah, and if you compare with now, they were way cheaper then. I remember when I was a kid, back then in France, it was 10 francs back on the days. You were able to have a sandwich and watch a movie. Looks like it's impossible nowadays.
Well, not just that, but they're actually quite sort of soulless, a lot of them. You go
Yeah,
in
true.
and, they're the same wherever you go, whereas this cinema had we all laughed, we called it the flea pit after a while, because it still had the really old 1940s seating.
Oh, wow, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those cinemas that time forgot, and for a long while that was a bad thing, but now it's kind of gone full circle.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
And it's a huge part of the heritage of the people, in that town. So, but the cost of... we used to go down there every week, even when I'd been living in London for 10 years. We'd go and visit the parents and go for the cheap cinema.
That's amazing. It's a shame that nowadays it costs an arm and a leg to go and watch a movie sometimes, especially with the 3D glasses.
Yeah, and I think that's a shame, because I think families miss out on that. I think a lot of children do. Going to the cinema isn't, for many of families, it's not affordable. It's not a weekly thing in the way I grew up. It's a real special treat taking 2 children to the cinema, or taking their friends with them.
Yeah, forget about it.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to choose. Okay, next month we're gonna go watch this movie. What about 6 months? In a 6 month time, we might go and see another movie.
Yeah.
Rather, back on the days, it was I actually built some of my cinema culture around I mean, because of the fact that the cinema were cheap. Back then, I mean, I just had to take a train and go do like 25 kilometers, and I'm there watching cinema. I mean, watching movie from morning to afternoon. So I know that it's almost impossible nowadays. It's true that other way of let's say watching movie has appeared since then, but the cinema experience it's unique.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was just. I'm sure it wouldn't be allowed now, but we literally they used to let us in as children, you know, and we'd all kind of. Well, half of them came in through the toilet window, as I said before. You'd often sort of find someone crawling under the seats around you.
That's unbelievable. Okay, so what movies or creative mediums in general inspire you?
I love animation. I've always loved animation. I love how I love the colours, the saturation of colours. My favourite movie as a child was Fantasia because it was this really old movie, and I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through. I've always seen sort of snippets. And I think when my son was younger, we got a copy of it, and a few times I got to see it from beginning to end. But I absolutely was spellbound by the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies. The colour palette in every single scene is beautiful and absolutely exquisite. I just love it. And actually, I was looking at it the other day. I was using it as a reference for my son who's studying art. And I just sat down and watched it and enjoyed it. It was just beautiful. But also, I really love films like Brave. I love the textures in it and the colours, and just every time you see something like animation and how it moves on and progresses all the time, and all the different styles of animation that you get as well.
It's an art piece sometimes. When you watch it, I mean, you say, wow, the involvement, the dedication, the way how they see things through. Sometimes it's, since we work in the industry, we know more or less how it works, but even us, sometimes we are astonished when we see those art pieces.
Yeah, it's like it's composition on a page.
Yeah,
isn't
exactly.
It's like going to an art gallery sometimes.
It's the same thing. Sometimes, of course, not all of them, but sometimes, like as you well mentioned, Brave. Was astonishing.
And then you look at the different style of films as well. You look at the style of something like Sleeping Beauty and all the kind of elongated characters, and then it's really strange that sometimes you can see films and actually they jar you. And I'm probably going to have a lot of people screaming at the screen saying no, but I absolutely hate Sleeping Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast. I can't bear it. Something about it just doesn't sit well with me. But put me in front of Brave or Ants or The Incredibles or, Fantasia, and I'm lost.
That's amazing. Which director would you like to work with?
Okay, I'm going big. It's got to be Christopher Nolan.
That's an amazing choice. Amazing movies. Which one have you liked of his? Or one? No, it's very hard to say favorite. I hate this word. What's your favorite movie?
Yeah.
It doesn't work like this because favorite in that moment maybe, but.
I loved Inception because I think everyone was kind of fascinated by it and sort of trying to pick it apart, but I think back to things like Memento and how it just blew everyone away. It was just so original at the time.
That's true. I mean, and I would choose Prestige. Was amazing. And Insomnia as well was very good. The battle between the characters and the way how they shot, and yeah, it's so really well made, that movie.
Well, Prestige is quite an interesting one
Yeah,
because for ages I would talk about it with people, and it was almost like people hadn't seen it. And I think
that's true actually.
it's grown in popularity
Yeah,
over the years.
it reminds me a lot. It's the movie that I talked already a lot about it in this podcast. But it's Children of Men, Alfonso Cuarón movie. I don't know if you.
I think that's quite a scary movie. I have this whole genre of films I can't watch anything that's scary because normally I scream really loudly, and then the whole cinema jumps. Honestly, I get scared in Doctor Who. So
okay, yeah,
anything,
see. No, okay, maybe, yeah. If you did not see it, yeah, it's a very nice movie, and it did not go well in the box office back then. It was released around 2004, sorry, around 2004. But I don't know why I rewatched it during this let's say Brexit thing, and it reminds me a lot of the situation that we are living now in the UK.
Is it the one?
It's with Clive Owen. And
yes. Yeah. That's why I won't. Too scary. Too scary. People are trying to track them down. It's too scary.
So it's the movie is amazing, but it did not go well in the theaters. I think it was I'm not sure, but I think it was the same with Prestige. Actually, one of the best movies on IMDb, it's Shawshank Redemption.
Oh God, that's an amazing movie.
Yeah, but it did not do well in the box office. Actually, it was very bad apparently.
Yeah.
But it got popular over time. It's the same with I think it was the same with Prestige and some other movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
How easy it is to be a woman in the industry?
I think sometimes over the years I found myself more in the minority as a woman, and we all crave familiarity. So sometimes it's when you're in working environments that are very predominantly male, you aren't necessarily as comfortable as you could be if it was a more balanced environment. But has it been difficult working as a woman? Probably no different than other industries where you might be in that situation. My father was an engineer who designed car engines, and I think it was a similar environment. There were sort of 50 male engineers and 2 female engineers.
Okay, yeah.
You know, so I think that does happen. I think maybe if you were a male in a very female-dominated
of course,
environment,
it would be the same thing.
Yeah, it would be the same thing.
No, that's true. Do you see a switch in the industry over the years? Are things changing for the better to be more fair and inclusive, especially in senior positions?
I think there's been a huge movement in the industry for inclusivity in the last 5 or 6 years. You know, in the last during that time, you've had organisations like Access Visual Effects. You've had the IPA setting targets for the amount of women in senior positions, and I think that has highlighted the position. I mean, in the last few years, you know, you've had women in advertising, you've had Animated Women UK, and then there's been lots of events for female networking. So I think there is more of an awareness with those events happening that there should be more of a movement to having a more balanced and a more evenly sort of distributed situation with senior roles between male and female. Have I seen it happen? I think it's still a work in progress, really.
Okay. Sorry.
But actually, one of the things I would say as well is there are lots of companies where they do exist, because when I first started in the industry back in the early 90s, I left because I couldn't really see any women over the age of 30, although there were several women that were managing directors and in senior roles. But I was sort of thinking, well, where will I be, when I'm 40? Where will I be when I'm 50? I can't see women like that. And I want a career that's got a long-term progression to it. So they were in senior roles. But actually, and now what's happened is a lot of my friends have stayed in the industry and they've all grown up, and a lot of them have gone into senior roles. Maybe some of them didn't have the opportunities that maybe they should have been given, possibly. I can't comment on that.
I think it's everywhere. It's not only in our industry, actually, no? I think so.
Yes, yeah. But I found it easier coming back to the industry because when I came back, I could see that there were older women in the industry that had roles and had kind of progressed their careers. And I thought, well, yeah, this is an industry I could work in. So that,
Yeah.
I was, having taken time out, it wasn't something that I thought, no, I can't see myself going back to there. I can't see that there's a career there for me. I could see that those opportunities would be there.
I see. Has the two I'm inventing new words now. That's amazing. Sorry about that. Has the Me Too movement participated in improving women's conditions in our industry, especially?
I think the Me Too movement, I'm not aware of what they have specifically done, but I think what they've done is highlight a situation. I mean, the Me Too movement, initially came about through what I believe was kind of inappropriate behaviours in the workplace.
Yes, yeah.
But now I think the Me Too movement has highlighted equality. So when you think that the Equal Pay Act was introduced in the UK in 1970,
that was a long time ago.
it was a very long time ago. Yeah. But also in the 90s, you had organisations like the BBC advertising equality for everyone and promoting diversity. But very, very recently, we had situations where it was public knowledge that male presenters were being paid more than female presenters.
Yeah, I heard about that. It was a couple of years ago, no?
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, and it was in the papers a lot, and there was a big movement about it. And, because of that, well, not because of that, but also at around the same time, we have government laws about promoting equality in pay and more transparency in equality in pay. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the background, and a lot of sort of governing bodies are doing things. Organisations like the IPA that have promoted the idea that 40% of women should be in management positions, and I think it will be interesting over the next 5 years how that progresses.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think is the first step in turning around this problem?
I really wish I knew the answer to that.
I think no one has the answer.
I don't think anyone has that answer, but I think there's lots of things happening in the background. I mean, for example, recently I went to a film school in a recruitment role, and I walked into that film school, and 80% of the people in the room were women. And then I went back to my office and looked at my department, and it wasn't 80% female.
I would say it made quite the opposite.
Yeah, probably was. But at some point, I think women are more attracted to the film industry now, and they have more of the technical skills. They don't seem to be afraid of it. And I think if you're going to film schools and 80% of the women in are, 80% of the course is female, or even if they're 50% female, in 5 or 10 years' time, we should expect those departments to be 50% equal.
Of course, it has to reflect.
Yeah, it has to reflect what's going on outside in the real world. And at the moment, I think it doesn't. And I think that's possibly, I think that kind of goes back to the classrooms a lot. But, you've got organisations that are going around, and you've got organisations like Access Visual Effects, and other different organisations that are going around and trying to get to the classrooms and get to the students that might not think that visual effects is for them, and promote the idea that it is a career that women can do.
Do you think the fact that in our field we are behind the screen, it's easier to hide the disparities or pretend they don't exist rather than in Hollywood, for instance?
I think that there's a lot of focus on Hollywood because it's something we can see, but I think there are a lot of industries that struggle with disparities, and I think that must be the reason why we have more transparency in equal pay. And those rules have been introduced in recent years, because obviously that must be a situation for them to introduce rules to protect equality in pay.
Yeah. Can we say that tokenization is present in the VFX industry, or if so, how is that manifested?
I'm not really aware of ever experiencing tokenization. I've never been party to or heard of anything like that. But what I am aware of is I think it's a growing thing, and it will expand. There's more talk about women being in senior roles, and there's movements to get people from different classes and different backgrounds to be more representative of the world out there. But something that has always sat, not sat uncomfortably, but something I've always been aware of is I had a severely physically disabled father who went through night school and became an engineer. And he managed a team of about 25 people. Wow. But he wore metal calipers, so he drove with hand controls. Life wasn't easy for him, but maybe his disability was because of polio, and that's not an illness we have. But I look around, and I don't always see as many people with disabilities in our industry. I also have a child with autism, and I know there's a big movement to find autistic people employment, but again, there's sort of there are a diversity of disabilities, and I know a lot of them are hidden as well. But you don't see a lot of, you very rarely see people with disabilities in our industry. But I'm not, as far as tokenization is concerned, I think it would be a very sort of difficult and sort of cynical approach to have someone as a token.
Yeah, of course. Makes sense. Have there been instances where you wanted to give up?
Every day it's 32 degrees outside and I could be on holiday somewhere by the beach.
Yeah, I think everyone
feels like that when you're melting and you walk into a room with the air conditioning unit. It's falling apart and mobile air conditioning units and a whole load of screens on. That's the day you want to give up.
I totally agree. I would do the same.
But we live in the UK, so,
Yeah.
it rarely happens.
Any experiences that stood out that you'd like to share with us?
Actually, it's a sort of slightly uplifting one more than anything, which is in 2015, the government introduced shared parental leave.
Yes.
And I found it so inspiring. The first person I saw share their maternity leave, I just thought that was fabulous. When I had my first child, my husband didn't even get paternity leave. It wasn't introduced, I think, till months after our child was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's fabulous that people can do that, and fathers can take paid paternity. I always get them muddled up. There's parental leave and paternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
But, the fact that a father can take 2 weeks off and get paid for it, or to be with their child, and that they have the opportunity to share that first year of their child's life. I think that's, a wonderful thing, that we're moving in the right direction. Maybe we'll end up like Scandinavia.
Wow, that's yeah, it's 2
Maybe.
years each parent, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
I had the chance to work a couple of months in Sweden,
Yeah.
and yeah, they are like light years. We are light years behind them. If you can say that. In terms of equalities and many other things, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
especially for paternity leave or parental leave. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you kind of read articles that actually it's sort of almost like a badge of honor that you've done it, for the guys, and they're really proud of it. And I just think that would be great, wouldn't it? You know?
Definitely. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Do you have any degrees, if so, in any field?
I don't have a degree, because I literally came straight from school at the age of 18 and sort of got like the most minimal, minor job kind of, and worked my way up. But I did, when I was at home with my children, I went back to study,
Mm-hmm.
and I studied psychodynamic counselling.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't get the degree. I did a course which was kind of up to the level of the first year of a degree, and then I kind of I don't know. I sort of thought about it, and I thought it was an immense responsibility, and it just wasn't a responsibility I wanted to take, and I miss the fact that actually I'd stepped away from anything visual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's when I thought, I'm being pulled back.
So we can be VFX producer or producer without having any particular degree in any field.
Yeah, you can. I do think the psychodynamic counselling was very interesting, because there was a lot to do with kind of group dynamics and actually about interaction between people. And when you're trying to manage a group of people and for them all to work in a harmonious way,
Mm-hmm.
Degrees don't really teach you that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the hard way.
Yeah. Well, if you're curious.
Yeah, exactly.
I
I think it's for everything, but unfortunately, for some industries, I'm not talking about visual effects, but for some industries, it's almost impossible to get in unless you have a degree. You're not necessarily good at it, but you have a degree. That field.
I do find the process of application now is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my jobs, I sort of initially started out through word of mouth, because I started off in advertising.
Mm-hmm.
People knew me. I had different connections. They knew that if you gave me a project, I would see it through to the end, that I would be responsible, and that I would be sort of considered and measured in how I approached that. But, I've tried to apply for different companies, and then you sort of get onto the landing page, and the process of applying for some of these jobs is almost like a 4 or 5 hour process.
Yeah. I don't know how it is for producers or VFX producers, because, for instance, as you know, for artists, it's showreel or demo reel or portfolio, and
Yes, it's much easier, and
yeah, I think
LinkedIn's a
so.
great thing.
How I'm curious. How does it work for a producer?
I think for producers, again, I think it is very much, again, word of mouth, your reputation. If somebody's looking for somebody, or also you have headhunters out there and different organisations, and LinkedIn's a great thing. When I recruited, I was always looking on LinkedIn, and now I'm a producer. That's how people contact me. I was freelance producing for a while, and a lot of work came that way, or actually networking.
Yeah, of course. But if, for instance, I think it's the same for you, but I don't have any in my family background. I don't have anyone working in any artistic field.
Yeah.
So how, for instance, I'm 20 years old, not anymore, but imagine if I am 20 years old. What will be the best process for me to get in the VFX industry as a producer?
As a producer, that's an interesting question. I would say go to a lot of industry events. There's lots of events that you can go to. Keep an eye out for those. As an artist, I just think the work always speaks. And actually, one thing I have to say, my pet hate was people would have reels that were maybe 7 minutes long, and they would start in a timeline of maybe their first thing, and they would kind of build it up, and sometimes you'd find fabulous work and it was buried at 7 minutes. And sometimes when you're in a hurry and you're looking for somebody, and it's a really, really busy time of year and everybody else is looking for somebody, so there's a shortage of artists around, maybe there's big projects on big film projects, and then I have to get sort of the head of department to sit through a number of reels. For my head of department to kind of wait whilst I fast forward to 7 minutes in a film, it's like, if you've got something great, stick it right at the front.
Exactly. People don't have time to look at 7 minutes long reel.
Yeah, or even if it's 3 or 4 minutes, don't bury it at the end as your big finale.
Yeah.
Stick it all up the front. Wow them. First minute, 2 minutes should be wowing. All the stuff you're not so sure of, that's got to go on the end, because by then they've made up their mind.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. Sometimes I've been in the industry for little while, I would say, and some people coming to the industry asking, I said, look, my show reel is 1 minute long.
Yeah, perfect.
And I have been in the industry for more than 10 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, short and sharp, good enough. I mean, it has to be, efficient of almost the first look. So.
Well, everybody's time poor at the moment, aren't they? It seems to be the thing that everything seems to be organised by people who think that their one project is the only thing you've got to see. Like you go onto websites, or you try and buy something, or you try and apply for something, and we're all so time poor now, so that actually, you need to get that information there in front of people and quickly. And the other thing I would say, recently I helped somebody write their CV, a young person, and they hadn't had any experience in production, but they'd had experience in managing teams, and they'd had experience with budgeting, and they'd had experience with scheduling, albeit it was actually within running restaurants and running pubs. But I said, actually, those skills you've got, you've got dealing with the public, you've got dealing with staff, hiring and firing staff, all of those are skills that are transferable. So, look at the experience you've got, whether or not you've been to film school or not, or look at other part-time jobs you've had, and think about how those skills are transferable. Even if it's working in a shoe shop, you've had experience of managing people's needs, but look at those skills and think about how they can be transferable and how those skills might be appealing to an employer.
That's very good advice. Because I don't see too many, let's say, production schools. I see a lot of VFX schools for artists, but I don't see too many VFX production schools or production schools, period.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, actually, an awful lot of people just work their way up in production, you know, so whether or not it's starting in reception or...
Yeah, true.
Or
Yeah,
starting
I
as...
forget about that, yeah.
Or starting as a runner and
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
you
I
want
want-
to do
yeah.
producing. People tend to kind of work their way up, but once you actually develop the technical skills and the technical know-how, you know, you'll develop, you know,
Yeah.
you'll move on.
Of course.
But the main thing is just always be curious, always be asking. You know, sometimes I kick myself and I think, why didn't I ask that? Or sometimes I ask and think, wow, what does that mean? You know, but then, you know, but then get people to clarify it and try and get them to break it down to a level that you do understand.
Yeah, it's layering, like layer
Yeah.
after layer after layer, and then you get to understand the proper meaning of things. Sometimes it depends. It depends
Yeah.
on the situation. It depends of who are we talking to as well. It's a lot of parameters.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think we more or less answered to the next question, but I will ask it anyways. When you first started applying to work in VFX, do you remember how many places you have applied to?
It's more, I would say that I've been really fortunate, and most things I've applied to, I've got. But actually, once I was in roles and then trying to move, sometimes I found that harder, and maybe that was also because I was just really busy working.
I see. Yeah.
So it was kind of making the time to do it as
Mhm.
well, because you kind of, you know, when you're really focused on projects and deadlines, putting aside time to apply for something else is just at the bottom of the pile sometimes, depending on...
Were there many studios back then?
There weren't an awful lot of studios. Yeah, I think the very first job that I went into in visual effects, I'd actually worked in a sound recording studio beforehand, and one of the clients had remembered me and had put me forward to the post house that I applied to.
Okay.
So, you know, again, it was kind of word of mouth,
Word of mouth, yeah.
really.
Nice. Yeah, it was. It feels like it was much easier back then.
It was, but I think it can still happen now. You know, it's
Yeah,
still,
of course. But if you have, I mean,
but
yeah,
it's being in the industry to start with, isn't it?
exactly.
But if
As-
you're new,
Yeah, if you're new, it's hard. But
I would also say networking's a really good
of
thing.
course.
So
yeah.
I know people who have turned up at events and chatted to people and they've remembered them. You know, I know myself when I've gone to film schools, you know, and you meet people and you remember them and you chat to them and they make an impression on you. You know, animation festivals, you know, places like Annecy and stuff.
FMX. Sorry.
FMX, yeah. And, you know, and there's just lots of different, you know, there's things like Women in Advertising
Yes.
that prior to lockdown
Mhm.
had events. There's a lot of organisations that do. And if you turn up at those and, you know, there'll be lots of people there who are always, you know, happy to chat. You know, I have on occasions chatted to people about easy ways for them to kind of apply to companies or who they should talk to, you know, maybe slightly more direct routes that they could take. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of people who do want to help, and you know, mentoring is a huge thing in the industry.
That's amazing. I love.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I love about this industry. It's unbelievable. I remember back when I started like years ago, and I mean I learned more working for working around for a month rather like 4 years studies, you know, all that studies. I mean in uni, it's unbelievable. Mainly because a lot of people around me, senior or just junior, or any position, were keen to teach me how things are working.
Yeah.
They never leave you by yourself there and wandering around what's happening. There is always someone next to you, or in the company, keen or very helpful, actually.
Yeah. I mean, actually, when I did work in a larger team, there were certain members of staff who were just phenomenal at mentoring people, and they really enjoyed it, and they found it really rewarding. And actually, going back to the point of me getting back into the visual effects industry, I'd actually taken 12 years out with my children. I was terrified. I didn't think
12 years.
12 years.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a long while.
Yeah.
But, I had one child and he had difficulties, and then the second child came along, and I just wanted to be there, for them. And then suddenly it just seemed like the right time. And I thought, well, how on earth am I getting back into this? Everything's changed, everything's moved on. And a great friend of mine made a suggestion. She was an agency producer, and she said, why don't you volunteer? So I was very fortunate. I knew someone who was very senior in a company, and I said, can I come and volunteer? I'll just come and help out 2 days a week. I want to get back to work. I want to get familiar with things. So I did that for a few weeks. They were really kind. Big shout out to Unit TV here, or Unit Visual Effects, whatever they're called now. But they were really kind, and they really helped me. And then from that, it sort of led to me bumping into other people that I'd worked with, and other people sort of saying, oh, right, so, you're serious about coming back. And then other really good, people that I'd worked with in the past, good friends, said, come back and freelance for us. And then it sort of grew and it snowballed. So, but for people who haven't worked in the industry, I would say anything you can do, anything that you can go make connections, anything you could volunteer for. I know that financially not everybody can volunteer, but anything to get your sort of foot in the door and meet people, that's what I would do.
I think determination is key anyways, for any condition or any position. I think it's everything. It doesn't matter the experience, it's more how determined you are to reach your goal, I think. Yeah, totally. Amazing. Okay, so yes. That's a tricky question. The cinema, and in this case VFX industry, is notorious for its lengthy working hours. Is that your experience?
Yes. There's no point me denying it. It does do long hours. Not always. I wouldn't say it's a continuous thing, but yes, it is lengthy working hours. I am quite curious how that will progress and whether or not it can continue, because currently we are a very young industry. So I was, when I first started at Visual Effects, we had a 3D department, and it was only two 3D artists. I think MPC had 4.
Wow.
So, I only knew of about sort of, 6, maybe 7 3D artists at the time. Now there's thousands out there, and they're all growing up within the industry. And currently, the legal age that you can retire in the UK is 65 for women, and 67 for men. And I wonder what's going to happen with the industry over time when all those artists, even the flame artists, there aren't really that many flame artists that are approaching the age of 60 or over. And, they're all really highly skilled individuals,
of course.
massively skilled individuals. And the first wave of artists often went off and set up their own companies and their own facilities, and some of them stepped away from operating and went more into management roles. But that can't happen for everyone. So, yeah, I do wonder what will happen about the hours culture over the next 15, 20 years, and whether or not that will change.
Did you learn ways to put boundaries?
Did I think I made decisions that put those boundaries in. So maybe I made career decisions initially to put boundaries in, and of some of the things I know when my children were much younger. For example, I didn't go into production. I was in resources.
Okay.
And with resources, yes, you can work a bit later, but you're not so much, you're not sort of, and yes, there will be deadlines, but often you could take the work home with you.
I see.
But I think what's going to be interesting now with COVID is what will happen in the future and how many people will be in positions where they can work from home more and split their work between the office and home. It will be interesting. I mean, often you have people in this industry that really love their jobs, really love the craft, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it, really.
Of course.
You can always choose to walk away if you want to, but also when you've made a commitment to a career path, and you've developed a skill set, you want to stay doing that. So I think it's easier from a production point of view because you can manage a project more, but sometimes you are put into situations where something needs to be done.
Of course.
And something needs to be completed, and for lots of different reasons, sometimes there's just last minute changes, and that's the way it works. But it seems to be something in industry generally that people are talking about more, is longer hours. And it's not just the post-production industry, it seems to be over a lot of fields. And I don't know why that is. I know when I lived in Australia, they had at the time they had a healthier attitude towards working hours, but I believe they're quite similar too now.
Okay. As a former recruiter, what's, in your opinion, one biggest assets to be able to work in VFX studio or VFX studios?
Communication.
Okay.
You've got to be able to be a team player. And I think sometimes that can come over sometimes when you're talking to people. Being open, and sometimes people will come along and they feel the need to imply that they know it. And actually, nobody knows everything.
Yeah.
I would have people in really senior roles saying, well, I don't know how to do that, and I don't know how to do this. Yes, I'd like to learn it more. And, you're always learning. So coming along and sort of trying to imply that, you know it is a really dangerous tact to take. But very few people did it. But that was always my one big, oh, I'm not sure about this. But yeah, communication, and actually being someone that you think is open and would be kind of open to kind of working with other people. And you ultimately, if you've got a group of 4 or 5 people that work really well and everybody gets on and it's a really nice working environment, you don't want to put somebody in that environment that's going to upset everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree.
Because actually you owe it to the people,
of course,
who you've already employed.
It, more or less.
Yeah, they've built it, they've worked hard, they've done the hours. You don't want to put somebody in who is too, who's only going to think, who may come over as only thinking about themselves.
Sorry to say this, but it looks like a virus. We introduced a virus to a group and it will infect all the others.
Well, they always say, don't they? They say there's no I in team.
Yeah, that's true actually. Are there values that the industry has lost over time, or any that you wish existed when you started working? Sorry.
I think um, I think the longer hours has changed in that when I first started, I remember our graders that used to come in very early in the morning and often would be working very late in the evening. We used to give them a day off every week. So they used to do 4-day weeks. You know, I mean, that's kind of unusual now, I would probably say. But it was probably because they regularly did very long hours. But, you know, we would always work really hard to give them that day off. But, you know, having said that, there is now, in some companies, there's a system of giving people doyles, you know, days in lieu. So people can claim a certain amount of time back. I also think the industry was so new that it always surprised me because I'd come from really big agencies of sort of 500 people, 400 or 500 people. And we had HR departments with, you know, 3 or 4 people in the HR department. And then you would go to different companies, or your friends would go to different companies. And a lot of the companies were owned by one person. And they were very small companies. A lot of them might only be 15 people or, you know, up to 50 or 60 people. And the managing director was essentially your HR team. And now I think there's just so much more legislation and there are more HR teams involved. But sometimes... because of that, sometimes you've lost a bit more of the humanity of the smaller teams. So, you know, it was always a big thing. If it was somebody's birthday, you'd get a cake and you'd have drinks and, you know, you'd all kind of beat up. I don't know if the bigger companies have so much room for that now.
I don't know, because I think it used to be more like this at some point, even for big companies. I remember I had similar experience in big companies, but it looks like it's fading away.
Yes, yeah, and I think when I first came back, it was like that. But over the last few years, that seems to have faded a bit. You know, I remember we had one head of HR, and if somebody had a baby, we would tell them, and they always had a little box for boys or girls, and they would send them a gift for the newborn baby. And I think that those personal touches, maybe they are, you know, maybe they're still there in some companies, but
no, for sure there is.
I think a few companies have lost that, maybe.
No, I'm sure there is, but it looks like the bigger is the company, the less. I don't know why, but I don't know what's the reason. But it looks like the bigger is the company, less attention to detail we have, I would say. Because this is a very interesting bond actually between the company and the employee.
Yeah, it's like a family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you feel like you're connected to you, because you don't, most of the time you don't know the owners in big companies.
No, you don't, and often you can be in the lift with them and not even realize who
you
they are.
you don't know who they are. But so
yeah.
you're let's say the mirror of the CEO or MD of that company is your producer most of the time, your PM or PA. So they reflect, even if of course we can't put everything on them, but they are the reflection of the company. And sometimes even the CEOs of the company never asked for that. They've asked for those touches or those details, or those details that create that bond between a lot of people inside the company. But this helps a lot to feel like more among those people rather than...
feel part of a community.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's quite important to have that. I mean, where I currently work, we're a much smaller team. We're actually owned by a much larger company, but we do feel like a family.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you get that, really. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I have really great managers at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's like, you know, I feel very lucky in that part.
That's a good thing to know. Do you find the industry to be accommodating to people when they need time off for several reasons, like health, family matters, parenting, so on
I've
and so?
been really lucky, actually. I I've been really fortunate. Maybe less. Well, that actually goes back to your point about what we've gained and what we've lost.
Yeah.
When I first started out in the industry, no. I remember I had a car crash and there was a
Oh.
lot of pressure on me at the time. I'm talking about sort of 20, 25 years ago. There was a lot of pressure on me not to go to the physio, but to stay
Oh,
and do
wow.
my job. That just wouldn't happen now. Now we've gone the other way where, when I was managing people, it was go and look after your
Yeah.
health. And everybody felt that people should look after their health. Bereavement was a big thing. I had a bereavement and I was so supported by my manager. And, people accept now that if you have a family member and they're ill, that we have that humanity in us that nobody wants to see somebody in emotional distress in the office. We've all learnt that lesson
Of course.
over the years that's just not conducive. It's not healthy, and actually, who wants to be that person? But I can happily say, in the sort of 6 or 7 years that I've been back in the workplace, I've always felt supported.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Uh,
Actually, big shout out to my current manager on that part because he's been great in the last year.
That's amazing. How are mental health issues being tackled in our industry?
I think the big problem with mental health, and I've learnt this through my studies, studying psychodynamic counselling, is that actually the person who struggles with mental health often is unaware of it themselves. So actually the first step for that person is to recognise it and ask for help. And whether or not that's going to a doctor or not, really that should be the first step. Actually going to the doctor and asking for help and recognising that there's no stigma. There was, in the past, it was seen as a stigma, but 30% of the population will struggle with depression and mental health issues. So you're more likely to have an issue with your mental health in your lifetime than most other things in life. Probably more likely to have an issue with mental health probably than you are to get married and remain married.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Super important.
But and also, there's so much in the media about it. I mean, you only have to look at the royal family and how much they're promoting mental health and well-being. It's a very different world now to sort of 20 or 30 years ago. And I really hope that anyone who is struggling does get help and does feel supported and does feel heard if it happens to them.
We hope so.
Yeah.
As a father to a toddler, I found it tricky to blame. To blame. I don't have to blame anyone. I'm really sorry. I have to take back this question.
That's fine.
I don't need to blame anyone except myself. As a father to a toddler, I find it tricky to balance my personal life and my career. Is it possible to combine parenthood and a career in the industry?
I think that's very specific to each person. So it depends, one, what your partner does, whether or not you have family around you, what support networks you have. When my first child was born, I had a husband who was flying off on shoots, so it would have been harder. I did go back to work for 6 months or so, and then my child was diagnosed with autism. So actually, for me, it was my personal choice was to stay at home, and now he's at art college and he's getting distinguished for the last 2 years, and he's doing
Amazing.
fabulously. So very proud of him. But For a lot of people, I think it really is a case-by-case basis. You know, if your partner's in the industry and is doing really long hours as well, and you don't have a support network around you, I mean, I think everybody with a young toddler is jealous of the person they know who has a mother that lives up the road.
That's true. That's really true.
Oh, we've all hated that person.
I'm not the only one then.
No, no. Green with envy.
How to avoid toxic environments working in VFX?
I actually, as time has gone on, I actually try and avoid them or move. Because I think a toxic environment is interesting because sometimes you may feel that it comes from above you, but sometimes it can actually come from the people who are alongside you, who I don't really feel I've ever experienced it from above. Sometimes I've felt it from people who have seen me as someone who maybe is their competition for the next move. And sometimes if I have felt myself in a similar position, I've actually kind of learned, you know, if you've got skills and you've got great skills and you don't feel it's the place for you for whatever reason, you might see it as toxic. Somebody else might absolutely love it. But look around. There's lots of work out there. You know, if you don't think you're in a place which suits you, you don't like the company culture, you know, that's not the only company. There's lots of other companies.
Or create one.
Yeah, or create one. Yeah, exactly. You know,
Easier.
but actually, it is quite interesting how, you know, I think there must be as many different company cultures as there are people. You know.
Yeah, true.
Everybody's got different ways of doing things. So, you know, your idea of toxicity might be someone else's idea of this is my kind of place.
Yeah, that's true actually, because a lot of people are coming from different background and different way of thinking. I would say different mindset. So the toxicity might be different from one person to another. Actually, could be two people from the same family. Actually, we never know.
Yeah, exactly.
We deal with different things depending on the situation, anyways.
Yeah, but I've sort of, I've actually kind of got to the point where I think life's a bit too short.
Yeah.
You know, why fight something that, you know, do you want to fight it? Do you want to make that change in that situation? And if you don't want to sort of donate all your energy to it, you know, or if you do, is it worth it? You know, or actually, are you better off doing something different, moving somewhere else, trying something else? You know, keep within your career, but just try somewhere else.
I agree. Or maybe step back a bit and go back to it second time. Maybe to my work, maybe not, and then
yeah,
we can think about something else, or move elsewhere.
And sometimes it's about your own expectations as well. I've seen people who've got themselves in a bit of a state over their own expectations and not really stepped back, looked at the situation and said, actually, have I earned that position? That can happen occasionally.
Yeah, true.
Have I earned that position? Actually, do I have that experience to merit that responsibility? I'm not saying that's the case all the time.
Of course, yeah, but I think I completely agree. Yeah.
Sometimes you are overlooked. You know, sometimes you just are. But actually, sometimes thinking something's toxic, you can sort of be a little bit sort of a bit tunnel vision about things sometimes, you know, and actually sometimes trying to see things from other people's perspective. Sometimes you are just sitting alongside someone who's not that pleasant. You know, it can work both ways.
Sometimes you just need a break, a holiday for a couple of weeks or like a couple of days to refresh our minds and maybe...
Yeah, and sometimes it can be actually that other things are happening to you that you're seeing things in a negative way. And as you said, you have a break, you look at it differently, and you think,
Of course, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. As a former recruiter, is it possible to avoid toxic people entering the the environment that you're working in?
I think you, as a recruiter, you try and avoid that, because and it gets back to my other point, which is if you've got sort of 10, 20 people who are working along nicely, why introduce someone that's going to, put the cat amongst the pigeons? Nobody wants wants to do that. But, sometimes it does happen, and sometimes people change, People grow, and sometimes they get responsibility, and sometimes it all goes to their head.
Yeah.
That can happen too.
But could we spot, I mean, of course, with your experience, because I'm sure you've seen hundreds, if not thousands of people in front of you. Could you spot it a bit?
Sometimes you can.
Yeah?
Yeah, sometimes you can. Sometimes, you walk away and you go, oh no, he's going to upset or she's going to upset. I can't, that's not going to be a mix that works together well. But sometimes people that also people can try and play you a little bit. Sometimes you can spot it. You like to think most of the time you can, but you can't always.
Yeah.
And also, what can happen is people have ambitions and they run alongside each other, and they both have vying ambitions, and that can create tension. And then, if you can, and if you're managing that team, you sort of try and keep them apart. If you can. You can't always,
Do you notice a difference in the way the industry is evolving with the newer generations?
I think there's a couple of things. Sometimes, the older generation like to talk about the apprentice generation, don't they? They blame it all on the apprentice.
Yeah.
That Alan Sugar or Donald Trump. I think I think the older generation sometimes like to blame the younger generation and say, oh, they all think they're entitled. But then I look back and think, hey, I was an account manager by the time I was 21.
Wow.
And I was managing an Oxford graduate.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So actually, has it changed? I'm not sure if it has.
Yeah.
I think the younger generation, I think they're coming out of schools, and there's a lot to do with being taught equality.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of discussion around unconscious bias, although actually I think bias is being taught to people. It's subliminal. It's around you all the time. It's in TV shows. Mm-hmm. It's in music promos. I never forget watching my 5-year-old dancing to a music promo, and her view was that you had to wear your pants because that's what pop stars did. And I suddenly went, yeah, when did it become that all female pop stars could only sing in a pair of knickers? When did that happen? I don't see men doing that. So in some ways they're being taught to be more inclusive,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually then look at sort of images, and that's not what's kind of being peddled at them. And I know there's a lot of discussion in the music industry about that at the moment, but I really like to think that a lot of them are going to be coming out of these schools, and that they're going to feel more entitled and feel that they can, that they won't be like me, looking and going, oh, there's no women here over the age of 30.
Yeah. Of course, not everyone is seeing the same thing from the same perspective anyways.
Yeah.
It's like the old generation won't accept the new, or the millennials. I hate this expression.
Yeah, I hate that saying.
I hate that saying. Yeah, they call us, or call millennials, or
Yeah.
maybe because older generation don't use smartphone as much as we do, for instance. So yeah, a lot of things changed. I think it was the same with our parents and the parents of our parents. It's a generational issues or way of seeing things.
Yeah, but I actually think why create that tension between generations as well? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think you can necessarily blame it on generations. You know, I know I was ambitious at 19 and 21 and 25 as well as I was at 35.
Yeah, things. I think things over time never changed. Ambition or
Yeah.
determination or things like that. I mean, it's the same through generation. If we need, if you want to succeed or reach a proper goal, we have to work. We have to be ambitious, determined, so on and so forth.
And also responsible
Of course.
and conscientious.
Yeah, yeah,
And actually, if you're not going to make it anyway. So I don't think things have changed. You know, I've watched young artists, straight out of college, months out of college, putting their head down, working hard, grafting, learning the skills, and doing everything they can to expand their knowledge. I mean, they often say, don't they, you know, people come out of university and actually the first job is when you really start to learn.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I remember I turned a page when I just got in the industry. That's it. I have to learn everything now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's exactly like that, how I saw it back then when I started, actually. It's like, okay, I turned that page, I need to create a new one now. So,
Yeah.
let's move on. Amazing. 2 left. What has been your overall experience in the industry and across the boards? What would you like our listener to keep in mind?
My concern for the future is ageism,
Mm.
because I think everybody's getting older, and what are we going to do in 15, 20 years' time when everybody's a senior?
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the moment we've got kind of quite diverse departments.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a newish industry. You've got people in their sort of 40s, some people in their 50s. I don't really see anyone older than that.
There is no...
Very few people
exactly.
older than that.
Yeah.
And I just sort of think, well, you know, in 10 years' time, those people are going to be pushing 60. And that huge pool of people in their 20s, they're all going to be in their 30s, and the 30s are going to be in their 40s. And everybody's going to be really experienced. And I just want people to have long-term careers, because if they can't retire till they're 67 or 65, I want them all to be in employment, you know.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a really foolish thing to say, but it is a really young industry, and watching it evolve, I'm just curious more than anything how that's going to develop. But then, you know, you look at sort of how the industry is expanding through streaming services and the amount of work that's coming in. Maybe everyone will be in employment, but I just think, you know, when you're an artist and you're pushing 63, will you want to be working till midnight to deliver something? I don't know. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah.
Will you be capable? I don't know.
Exactly. That's another question.
I think you'll be capable, but I don't think you're going to have a very good weekend. You'll be asleep.
Well, I don't know if we can, at that age, will be enough to recover, actually.
Yeah, I think the recovery time will be longer.
Because maybe now, as you well pointed out, people in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, 50s, they can more or less recover after a weekend. But when you are in your 60s, I don't see.
Yeah, that's true. And I think also, you know, the socialising will go out of the window, because some of the 20s and 30s, they can't recover from their social life.
No, I don't think they can. Amazing. So, your English is better than than my French. In Latin countries like France, Italy, or Spain, people would be not easy with you because of mispronunciation. rather in the UK, at least in my experience, people would put you at ease. This is like a mindset, in my opinion, that show you the mindset of the, let's say, the country, on how easy it is to get in the industry. I don't know if it's, I don't know if it makes sense.
I always think that, I know myself, I grew up in a really small town in the middle of nowhere. And I always found anybody that came from anywhere else fascinating and interesting, you know, far more interesting that, you know, I'm an Essex girl, you know. If they accept an Essex girl, you know, if you come into the industry and you say you're Spanish or you're Greek or you're from Latvia or you're from Jordan, you know, I've got to be really interested. And the other thing I found is you get really good holiday advice. I would literally go around the team and go, okay, I'm thinking of Greece. Hi.
Ambassadors.
Where's it good to go?
Actually, yeah,
now I know you're from Corsica. Yeah. Okay, after this chat, I'm going to be chatting to you about good spots to go to.
yeah, we are more than welcome. I'm ready because I have a map and everything. Because I already convinced at least dozens of people to go to Corsica since I've been living in the UK.
I have been once, and I did manage to find another Corsican artist who gave me a lot of really good ideas of places to go, but.
Yeah, you are more than welcome. Anything you want to add before we finish?
Thank you.
No?
Thank you for inviting me. I feel really flattered and really honoured. Thank you.
All the honor was mine. I had an amazing time. I hope you had a good time as well.
I had a good time. I hope I've done the women proud. I'm sure there's lots of people who are more qualified than me, but it's been a great experience.
No, I don't think so. you are the perfect fit for this episode.
Oh, thank you.
I thank you very much, Nikki, for this. I have to thank Zach as well. Thank you very much, Zach, for joining me today. I won't be able to do it without you, man.
And I will say merci beaucoup.
Je vous en prie. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye, Zach.
Bye.